The gunshot echoed through the rain-soaked streets of Seoul, and Min-jae didn't flinch. He stood in the penthouse window, watching red taillights disappear into the storm, knowing that bullet had been meant for him. His phone buzzed with a message he'd been expecting. "They know. You have until dawn." He turned from the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. 38 years old, and he looked a decade older. The empire he'd built from blood and fear was crumbling, and the men who'd once bowed to him were now plotting his execution. He had maybe 8 hours before they came for him. 8 hours to decide whether to run, fight, or simply wait for the inevitable. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made him reach for the gun at his waist, but he knew those steps. Soft, measured, deliberate. Amara. His housekeeper moved through his world like she existed in a different dimension, untouched by the violence that stained everything else in his life. If you're here for a story that will break your heart and put it back together, subscribe now. You won't regret it. Hit that like button and let's begin this journey together. She appeared in the doorway carrying fresh towels, her dark skin luminous against the white fabric. She didn't look at him directly, never did, but he could feel her awareness of him like a physical presence. She was 26, though she carried herself with the gravity of someone much older. She'd been working in his house for 2 years, and in all that time, he'd never heard her raise her voice, never seen her rush, never witnessed her show fear. "You don't need to do that tonight," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "You should go home." She paused, finally meeting his eyes. "The storm is bad. I'll stay until it passes." They both knew she was lying. The storm was nothing. Seoul had weathered worse. But she set the towels on the chair and moved toward the kitchen, and he didn't stop her. The truth was, he didn't want to be alone tonight. Not tonight, when he could feel the walls closing in. Min-jae walked to his study and poured himself whiskey, the amber liquid burning down his throat. The room was filled with the trappings of power, expensive art, leather-bound books he'd never read, a desk that cost more than most people's cars. All of it meant nothing now. He thought about his father, dead 15 years, who'd told him the Mafia life would consume him. His father had been right. In the kitchen, Amara moved with quiet efficiency, preparing tea she knew he wouldn't drink. This was her ritual, her way of maintaining normalcy in a house that breathed violence. She'd grown up in a small village in Uganda, the eldest of 6 children. Her father was a pastor, her mother a teacher. They'd raised her with values that felt ancient and unshakable: dignity, faith, the belief that a person's worth wasn't measured by their circumstances but by their character. She'd come to Korea 4 years ago on a student visa, planning to study nursing. But her father had fallen ill, and the medical bills had drained everything. She'd taken the housekeeping job to send money home, telling herself it was temporary. 2 years later, she was still here, still sending most of her salary back to Uganda, still living in a tiny room in Itaewon, still holding onto the values her parents had instilled in her. Working for Min-jae had been unsettling at first. She'd heard the rumors, seen the men with guns who sometimes visited, noticed the way he carried violence in his shoulders like a weighted cloak. But she'd also seen something else: the way he stood at the window for hours, the exhaustion in his eyes, the careful distance he kept from everyone, including himself. She brought the tea to his study, setting it on the desk without a word. He was staring at a photograph she'd never noticed before. A young woman with kind eyes and a boy who must have been Min-jae, maybe 7 years old. They were smiling, standing in front of a small house with flowers in the yard. "My mother," he said, startling her. He never spoke about personal things. "She died when I was 8. Breast cancer. My father couldn't afford treatment." Amara stood still, holding the empty tray against her chest. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. "That's when everything changed," Min-jae continued, his voice distant. "My father started working for the Jung family. Small jobs at first. Then bigger ones. By the time I was 12, I knew what he really did. By 15, I was doing it too." He looked up at her, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before, a desperate, raw need to be understood. "I didn't choose this life, Amara. It chose me. And now it's going to kill me." She set the tray down carefully. "What do you mean?" "They're coming for me. Tonight, tomorrow, soon. There's been a betrayal, and I'm the loose end they need to tie up. He laughed, but it was a hollow sound. Fitting, isn't it? I've ordered enough deaths. Now it's my turn. The room fell silent except for the rain hammering against the windows. Amora's mind raced. She should leave. She should walk out of this house and never come back. Getting involved in his world was dangerous, possibly fatal. But she stood there, looking at this man who'd built walls so high that even he couldn't see over them anymore, and she felt something shift inside her. You could run, she said quietly. Where? They have people everywhere. Besides, I'm tired of running. I've been running my whole life. He stood and walked to the window again, his back to her. Do you ever wonder what it's like? To be someone else? To wake up and not carry all the things you've done? Every day, she said, surprising herself with the honesty. He turned to face her. What would you be? If you could be anyone? A nurse. Like I planned. I'd work in a clinic back home, help people who can't afford hospitals. I'd make my parents proud. She paused. What about you? I don't know. I've never let myself imagine it. He poured another whiskey, his hand shaking slightly. Maybe I'd be a teacher. My mother wanted that for me. She used to say I was good at explaining things, patient with complicated ideas. You still could be. No. The word was final. That version of me died a long time ago. The hours crawled by. Min-jae couldn't sit still, moving from room to room like a caged animal. Amara followed at a distance, not speaking, just present. Around midnight, he found her in the kitchen again, hand-washing dishes that could have gone in the machine. Why do you do that? He asked. My grandmother taught me. She said there's meditation in manual work. It keeps you present. Are you ever not present? She smiled, small and sad. When I let myself think too much about home. About my father's illness. About how long I've been here. She rinsed a plate carefully. Sometimes I wonder if I'm becoming someone I don't recognize. Someone who can work in a house like this and pretend it's normal. You're nothing like me, Amara. Don't ever think that. I didn't say I was like you. I said I was changing. That's different. He leaned against the counter, studying her. Do you hate me? For what I am? She considered the question seriously. I don't know you well enough to hate you. I know the house, the routines, the way you take your coffee. But I don't know you. Maybe that's better. Maybe. Or maybe you've spent so long hiding that you've forgotten there's something worth knowing underneath. The words hung between them, gentle but cutting. Min-jae felt something crack inside his chest, a feeling so unfamiliar it took him a moment to name it, hope. Not hope that he'd survive the night, but hope that before the end, he could be honest with one person. Just one. Can I ask you something? His voice was barely above a whisper. Yes. Would you stay with me tonight? Just stay. Talk to me. Help me remember what it's like to be human instead of a monster. Amora's hands stilled in the water. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the desperation there. But she also saw something else, respect. He wasn't demanding. He was asking. Begging, almost. I'll stay, she said carefully. But I need you to understand something. I'm not like the women you're used to. My body is mine. My choices are mine. Where I come from, we believe intimacy is sacred, something you give, not something that's taken. Do you understand? I'm not asking for that, he said quickly. I just don't want to die alone. I don't want my last night to be spent with a gun in my hand, waiting for footsteps. I want to talk to someone real. Someone who sees me as more than what I've become. She dried her hands slowly, thinking. Every instinct told her to leave, to protect herself from whatever this night might bring. But there was something in his eyes that stopped her, genuine human need, stripped of artifice or manipulation. She'd seen people die in Uganda, watched her own grandmother pass away. She knew what it looked like when someone needed grace in their final hours. I'll make more tea, she said. And you're going to tell me the truth. All of it. If this is your last night, you don't get to hide anymore. They sat in the living room, the city lights of Seoul spread out below them like scattered stars. Min-jae talked, and once he started, he couldn't stop. He told her about his first kill at 17, how he'd vomited afterward for hours. He told her about the people he'd hurt, the families he'd destroyed, the weight of every decision that had brought him to this moment. I remember their faces, he said, staring into his glass. Every single one. People think men like me are cold, that we don't feel. But I feel everything. I just learned to lock it away. Amara listened without judgment, her face calm. My father says everyone carries two wolves inside them. One of violence and one of peace. The one that wins is the one you feed. I've been feeding the wrong wolf my whole life. It's not too late to change that. Yes, it is. You don't come back from the things I've done. She leaned forward, her voice firm. My God is a God of second chances. I've seen murderers become ministers. I've seen thieves become teachers. Redemption isn't about deserving it. It's about choosing it. You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this? They talked until 2 a.m, the conversation flowing between heavy confessions and surprising moments of lightness. He asked about her childhood, and she told him about running through mango groves with her siblings, about church services that lasted 4 hours, about her mother's cooking and her father's terrible jokes. It sounds beautiful, he said. It was. It still is, when I let myself remember without the sadness. Do you regret coming here? She thought about it. I regret the circumstances that forced me to come. But I don't regret the experience. I've learned things about myself, about the world. I've become stronger. You were already strong. Strength isn't something you have. It's something you choose, every day, in small ways. At 3 a.m, Min-jae's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and Amara saw his face go pale. What is it? They're moving faster than I thought. They'll be here within the hour. The air in the room changed, tension crackling like electricity. Amara's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. Then you need to leave. Now. And go where? I told you, there's nowhere. Then fight. Call the police. Call someone who can help. He laughed bitterly. The police. Half of them are on my payroll. The other half want me dead as much as the Jung family does. So you're just going to sit here and wait? What else is there? She stood abruptly, anger flashing in her eyes. Choice. There's always choice. You spent all night telling me about your regrets, about the man you wish you could have been. Well, here's your chance. Choose differently. For once in your life, choose something that isn't death. You don't understand. I understand that you're afraid. I understand that it's easier to give up than to fight for something better. But I also understand that you asked me to stay tonight because you didn't want to die as the monster everyone thinks you are. So don't. Be someone else. Even if it's just for 1 hour. Her words hit him like a physical blow. He stood, pacing, his mind racing. She was right. He'd spent the entire night talking about redemption as if it were something theoretical, something for other people. But it wasn't. It was a choice. Right now. In this moment. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Amara watched as he spoke rapidly in Korean, his voice hard and commanding. When he hung up, he looked at her with something new in his eyes, determination. I just called the prosecutor's office. The one not on my payroll. I'm going to turn myself in, but first I'm going to give them everything. Every name, every account, every dirty cop and politician in my network. I'm going to burn it all down. They'll kill you for that. Probably. But at least I'll die doing something right. Amara felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. Then we need to get you somewhere safe until they arrive. We? You think I'm leaving now? After all that? She shook her head. My grandmother also used to say that when you help someone cross the river, you get to the other side too. I'm seeing this through. They moved quickly, gathering documents from his safe, copying files from his computer. Min-jae called his most trusted driver, one of the few men he believed wouldn't betray him. The plan was simple: get to the prosecutor's office before the Jung family got to him. But as they were preparing to leave, the power went out. The house plunged into darkness, and Min-jae immediately grabbed Amara's hand. "They're here," he whispered. "They cut the power." Her hand trembled in his, but her voice was steady. "Is there another way out?" "The service elevator. But they'll have men covering it." "Then we fight." He looked at her in the darkness, illuminated only by the city lights through the windows. "You should hide. They're not here for you. I told you. I'm seeing this through." They moved silently through the house, Min-jae leading with practiced ease. He knew every corner, every shadow. They reached the service elevator, and he pressed the button, praying it would still work on backup power. The doors opened with a soft ding that sounded deafening in the silence. They stepped inside, and the doors began to close. That's when they heard it, footsteps. Running. Shouting in Korean. The elevator descended, and Amara realized she was holding her breath. Min-jae squeezed her hand once, gently, and then let go. He pulled his gun out, checking the chamber. "If something happens," he said, "you run. You don't look back. You go straight to the address I gave you and tell them everything. Promise me." "I promise." The elevator stopped at the parking garage. The doors opened. Empty. They stepped out cautiously, moving toward the car where the driver waited. They were halfway there when the first shot rang out. Min-jae pushed Amara behind a concrete pillar, returning fire. She pressed herself against the cold concrete, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. More shots. The sound of men running. Min-jae moved like someone who'd done this 1,000 times, efficient and deadly. But there were too many of them. She saw him take a hit to the shoulder, saw him stumble but keep firing. The driver ran toward them, providing cover fire. Together, they managed to push back the attackers long enough to reach the car. They threw themselves inside, and the driver floored it, tires squealing. Bullets shattered the rear window, and Amara ducked, glass raining down on her. Min-jae pressed his hand against his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. "How bad?" she asked. "I've had worse." She tore a piece of her dress and pressed it against the wound. His face was pale, but his eyes were clear. "We're going to make it," she said, not sure if she was trying to convince him or herself. "Even if we don't," he said, "thank you. For tonight. For seeing me. Don't talk like that. You're not dying. Not tonight." The driver navigated through back streets, avoiding main roads. Behind them, the sound of sirens. Ahead, the prosecutor's office, lit up like a beacon. They were going to make it. Against all odds, they were going to make it. The car screeched to a halt in front of the building. Police were already there, weapons drawn. Min-jae raised his hand slowly, and Amara did the same. They stepped out of the car, and immediately officers surrounded them. Min-jae spoke quickly in Korean, showing them his phone with the call records, telling them about the documents in the car. Amara watched as the tension slowly shifted, as the officers began to listen instead of arrest. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, drop a comment below. I read every single one. And don't forget to like this video, it helps more people find stories that matter. An ambulance arrived for Min-jae's shoulder. As the paramedics worked on him, a senior officer approached Amara. "You're the housekeeper?" he asked in English. "Yes. You're free to go. We don't need you for questioning." She looked at Min-jae, who was being led toward the building, and he turned back to meet her eyes. There was so much she wanted to say, but the words wouldn't come. He nodded once, a gesture of gratitude and goodbye, and then he was gone. Amara stood in the pre-dawn darkness, the adrenaline slowly draining from her body. She was shaking, she realized. The officer offered to have someone drive her home, and she accepted numbly. As the car pulled away, she looked back at the building where Min-jae had walked willingly into a cage. But it wasn't a cage, she thought. It was the first free choice he'd made in 20 years. The following weeks were a blur. The news exploded with the story, a Mafia boss's complete testimony bringing down one of Seoul's most powerful crime syndicates. Arrests were made. Politicians resigned. The city buzzed with scandal and reform. Amara went back to her small room in Itaewon, back to her quiet life. She found a new job at a hospital, finally starting the nursing training she'd postponed for so long. She sent money home to Uganda and tried not to think about that night too often. But she did think about it. Every day. 3 months later, a letter arrived. It was from Min-jae, forwarded through a lawyer. She opened it with shaking hands. Amara. They sentenced me to 15 years. It should have been life, but the prosecutor argued for leniency because of my cooperation. 15 years feels like forever and not long enough to pay for what I've done. I think about that night constantly. Not the violence or the escape, but the hours we spent talking. You asked me who I would be if I could be anyone. I'm finding out now. In here, I teach English to other inmates. I'm working on my degree. I'm feeding the right wolf, as your father would say. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that you saved my life in ways that have nothing to do with that night. You showed me that redemption isn't about deserving it. It's about choosing it. Thank you for staying. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Min-jae. Amara read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. She folded it carefully and placed it in her Bible, between the pages of Psalms where her grandmother had once pressed a flower from home. She wrote back. Not a long letter, just a few lines letting him know she was well, that she was proud of him, that she prayed for him every night. She didn't make promises about visiting or waiting. This wasn't that kind of story. Years passed. Amara finished her nursing degree and got a job at a free clinic. She saved enough money to bring her father to Korea for treatment, and he recovered. She eventually met someone, a kind teacher from Ghana who made her laugh and understood her values. They dated slowly, properly, building something real. But she never forgot that night. And she never stopped writing to Min-jae. Once a month, like clockwork, she sent him letters about her life, her family, her faith. He wrote back, telling her about the men he was helping, the classes he was teaching, the person he was becoming. 10 years after that night, she received a letter with different handwriting. Min-jae was being released early for good behavior. He wanted to see her, if she was willing, but he understood if she wasn't. He included his parole officer's contact information, so she could verify everything, so she'd feel safe. Amara discussed it with her husband, who surprised her by encouraging the meeting. This is part of your story, he said. Part of who you are. I'm not afraid of it. She met Min-jae at a small cafe in Hongdae on a Tuesday morning. She almost didn't recognize him. The man who'd sat across from her a decade ago had been lean and hard, with eyes that carried violence. This man was softer somehow, his face more open. He still carried scars, some visible, some not, but they looked different now. Like they'd been transformed from wounds into lessons. They ordered coffee and sat in awkward silence for a moment before both starting to speak at the same time. They laughed, and the tension broke. You look good, he said. Happy. I am. You look different. Better. I am better. Still working on it every day, but better. He stirred his coffee, not meeting her eyes. I wanted to thank you. In person. For everything. You already did. In about 50 letters. I know. But some things need to be said face to face. He finally looked up. That night, you could have run. You could have let me die. You had every reason to. But you stayed. And you didn't just stay, you challenged me. You refused to let me give up. I've thought about that every single day for 10 years. Amara's eyes filled with tears. I didn't do anything special. I just saw someone who needed help. You saw me as human when I'd forgotten how to be human. That's not nothing. They talked for 2 hours, catching up on lost time. He told her about the school he was starting, an after-school program for at-risk kids in his old neighborhood. She told him about her work at the clinic, about her father's recovery, about her marriage. I'm glad you're happy, he said when it was time to leave. You deserve it. So do you. Don't forget that. They hugged goodbye, brief and warm, and then went their separate ways. As Amara walked back to her car, she felt a sense of completion, like a chapter of her life had finally closed properly. But it wasn't really an ending. Min-jae's school became successful, helping dozens of kids avoid the path he'd taken. Amara's clinic expanded, serving more families every year. They kept in touch, occasional emails and holiday cards, watching each other's lives unfold from a distance. 15 years after that night, Amara returned to Uganda with her husband and their 2 young daughters. They were planning to open a clinic there, finally fulfilling the dream she'd had as a girl. On her last day in Seoul, she visited Min-jae one final time. He was at his school, teaching a classroom full of teenagers. She watched through the window for a moment before he noticed her. The way he spoke to those kids, patient, honest, encouraging, would have been impossible to imagine from the man she'd met that rainy night so long ago. After class, they walked through the neighborhood together. It had changed, gentrified somewhat, but the bones of it remained. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Turning yourself in? Losing all those years?" "Every day," he said honestly. "But I don't regret the choice. Those years in prison gave me something I never had before, time to become someone worth being. If I'd run that night, I'd still be running. Still hiding. Still feeding the wrong wolf." "My father would like you," she said. "He always says God's favorite stories are about second chances." "What about you? Do you ever regret that night?" She thought about it, really thought about it. "No. I learned something important. That dignity isn't about protecting yourself from difficulty. It's about choosing to do what's right even when it's hard. You taught me that." "I think it was the other way around. Maybe we taught each other." They reached her car, and he helped her load her bags. "Will you come back?" he asked. "Maybe. Someday. Korea will always be part of my story. And you'll always be part of mine." She hugged him goodbye, longer this time, and he let himself hold on for just a moment before letting go. As she drove away, she watched him in the rearview mirror, standing on that Seoul street, a man who'd been remade by the choice to be honest for one night. That night, on the plane back to Uganda, Amara opened her journal, the same one she'd been writing in since she first came to Korea. She turned to a blank page and began to write, not knowing if anyone would ever read it but needing to record the truth of what had happened, of what she'd learned. "Love isn't always romance," she wrote. "Sometimes love is staying when it's easier to leave. Sometimes love is seeing someone's humanity when they've forgotten it themselves. Sometimes love is a single night of honest conversation that changes 2 lives forever." That night, we saved each other. He needed someone to see him, and I needed to remember that my values weren't just about protecting myself, they were about extending grace, even to those who seemed beyond it. One night to say goodbye. But it wasn't really a goodbye. It was a beginning for both of us. We just didn't know it yet. She closed the journal and looked out the window at the stars above the clouds. Somewhere below, Min-jae was probably standing in front of another classroom, teaching another group of kids that their past didn't have to define their future. And here she was, flying toward her own future, carrying the lessons of that night like precious cargo. The plane flew on through the darkness, carrying Amara toward home, toward the life she'd always dreamed of but had temporarily set aside. She thought about her daughters, growing up with parents who'd chosen to live according to their values even when it was difficult. She thought about the clinic she'd build, the lives she'd touch, the difference she'd make. And she thought about Min-jae, a man who'd been given one night to say goodbye to his old life and had chosen, against all odds, to say hello to something new. The story would live on in both of them, a reminder that redemption was always possible, that human connection could happen in the most unlikely circumstances, and that true love, the kind that changed lives, didn't always look like the fairy tales promised. Sometimes it looked like 2 people from different worlds, sitting together on the darkest night, refusing to let each other face the dawn alone. If this story touched your heart, help others find it by sharing this video. And subscribe to my channel for more stories that explore the depths of human connection. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Your time matters, and I'm honored you spent it here. Leave a comment and let me know what you thought. I'll be reading every single one. Until next time, remember, we all carry 2 wolves inside us. Choose wisely which one you feed.